Okay, in this video we're going to go over how we actually spawn in waves of enemies over time and how we can actually spawn in multiple different types of enemies in a single wave as well. It's actually not as hard as you may think. So just to make sure that I have different AI, I've got this AI test. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to create a child of that. I'm just going to call it AI test child, and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to do a few things just to make it different from my main AI. First one is I'm going to get the character movement, and I am going to go down to walking speed, and I'm going to make this pretty quick, okay, maybe 900, alright, and I'm going to make the mesh and the capsule a bit smaller as well, okay. So let's get our mesh, make that smaller too. Maybe a bit too small. Yes, I think it is. Just so we have something different visually as well. We could come in and change the materials as well to kind of make it look maybe visually different a bit more. Another thing, let's see, if I go to my health, I'll also give it like far less health now. So it's only got 20. So this enemy is going to be like quicker, smaller, but it's going to have less health. So hopefully that will kind of balance things out in a way. So what we're going to do next is I'll probably keep this within the AI folder. Actually, I'm just going to right click. I'm going to go to blueprint class, actor, and I'm just going to call this spawn manager. Okay, and let's open this up. So there's no real components that we're going to have to put in here. All we're going to have to do is go to the event graph and event begin play. We're going to have a simple timeline, okay? And I'll just call this here one wave 1. And in the timeline, what we're going to do is we're going to make a event track, and we'll just call this here one like main enemy, okay? And this event track, okay, if we go compile this and just go back to our event graph here, you can see that it doesn't have like a data pin. It has an execution pin that we have created. Basically, if we create keyframes within this timeline, again, we're just holding shift and create the keyframe. Anytime that the timeline comes across one of these keyframes, this here is basically going to execute. So over the course of, well, that might be too many. Over the course of these 5 seconds, say, we can have like, you know, maybe 6 or 7 enemies, spawn out. So every time that comes across one of these, this execution pin gets executed. It doesn't matter where these are in terms of like its value, okay? So we're not really interested in its value. It's all about where the time is, okay? So like say this is wave 1, all we have to do then is pull out of this main enemy and type in spawn spawn actor from class, and the actor that we're going to spawn is going to be let's say AI test. There we go. And we need a transform, okay? So this is going to be the second part of this here. So we're going to compile. Oh, you see this isn't going to work. So we're going to make a variable. We're going to call this spawn points. So we need to have spawn points in the level where enemies are going to actually spawn. And we're going to change the variable type to target, and it's going to be a target point, okay? Just get an object reference, and we're actually going to make this an array because we're going to have a list of them, okay? It's not just going to be one. And then we're going to open the AI and make this public. So next thing that we do is once we've got that public is we haven't set any of these spawn points yet, but we need to like get a random spawn point. So whenever we have a list of these, it will randomly choose from a list wherever this enemy is going to spawn. So what we'll do is we'll get our list, okay, of spawn points. We'll type in get, and we're going to get what's called a copy, okay? And basically this is where we can like determine where on the list we're going to grab them. So say if we have, you know, 4 spawn points and we have 4 in here, whatever our spawn point is in here, you know, it's going to grab that. If this was 3, it's going to grab that, and so on and so forth. Then what we can do is whatever spawn point we have, we can just get the transform of that. So get actor transform and plug that in, okay? Now, to make this random, pretty easy. All we have to do is, let's get rid of these, is get random, get random, just random integer in range. And the minimum is always going to be 0 because your array always starts with 0. Now, we don't know how many spawn points we're going to have, and this might change like over time. And instead of kind of coming in here and hard coding in a number and always trying to, okay, I've added another spawn point, I better come back here and kind of like add another one. What we can do is we can get our list and we can type in length. We can get the length of it and plug that into the max. Now, the way arrays work, this might not be the best thing. We might have to minus 1 off of it, and I'm going to tell you why. So say if we have, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in here, so the length of our actual array is 5, but it only goes to 4. So you imagine now that if I plug this length into max, the max that it can go to is 5. So it might try and get an element that's on the 5th row, but we don't have a 5, okay? So what we have to do is, from our length, we've got a minus 1 from it, okay? So that means our length, even though it's 5, 5 elements, the actual array element label is not going to be ever 5. So we're going to minus 1 off of it. And that's just going to, make sure that this never goes beyond what we have. And that's it, okay? So this is going to play. Main enemy is going to spawn, okay? So if we drag this in, let me find a suitable spot for this just so I remember where it is. So I'll put it over here. We need to add in some spawn points. Thing we could use is target points. I find pretty useful. So if we bring those in, and like I make say 4 of them. Now obviously you probably wouldn't have them in a row like this here. But what I can do now is I can get my spawn points. Oh, we've already made 5. Let me get rid of that so I know what we're making. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we can add in our target points. 4, 5. And if I press play now, you can see that these enemies are starting to spawn. So one of the things that you may have to check with these enemies is, one, I don't have my nav mesh the whole way over, so they were getting stuck. 2, and this is really important, you need to go to your AI test, your parent one, and you got to go to class defaults, and you got to make sure that auto possess AI is set for placed in world and also spawned, okay? So that means that if the AI are only set to placed in world, the controller will only ever possess it, okay, if it's ever placed. But if we're spawning it, which we're doing now, it will never work. So we have to make sure that it's on placed in world and spawned. So let's press play now. I'll do it up here so we can kind of see from a distance we're not getting shot. So the AI are going to spawn and like kind of run around. So what happens if you want another wave and you want to have multiple enemy types? Simple again. So we go into our spawn manager and let me turn this into a macro, okay? Because we're going to be using this over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse to a macro. I'm going to go into this macro and I'm just going to make sure that we can also have an input parameter for a class type. So I'm going to just drag this over to the input pin and you can see it will make a class. And I'm going to call this macro enemy to spawn. Because again, this is just something that we're going to be using over and over again. It's giving me an error. Let's see what the error is. Spawn node spawn actor generated from expanding enemy to spawn must have a class generated. Oh, That's the issue. We've made this macro and we've added an input, but we haven't selected the class. So just going to make sure it's AI test. So it just means now whenever we bring in this enemy spawn, you know, all this is set up for us. We don't have to kind of do it again. We all we have to do is select whatever class we're going to be doing. So it just makes it a lot neater. So whenever we finish this wave, what we could do is we could add a delay in, say of like maybe 10 seconds, and we could make a new timeline, and we could call this wave 2. Then all we have to do is go in here, make 2 event tracks. One is called main enemy, and the other event track is going to be fast enemy. Okay, I forget what I've called it. And we're just going to add in more points in here. And again, it doesn't matter where they are on the y-axis, it's all about the x. So we're going to have a lot more of these fast enemies coming in. One thing that we might want to do is I'm just going to go back to my macro here and see this collision handling override. This depending on if the enemy spawns on top of another enemy, this will kind of like determine if it actually will spawn, you know, depending on if it's colliding with something like a wall or something else. What we want to do is maybe say try and adjust location, but always spawn. Okay, so it will always spawn, but it might just generally try and move the location of the spawn around so it's not conflicting or overlapping with another enemy. So now we've got this here done. We can go to our event graph. So we've got main enemy, fast enemy. So let's go enemy to spawn, put this in here. And this is going to be AI test. And then my fast enemy is just called AI test child. Okay. Complete, save your level, press play. So we'll get our first wave, and then we'll have like 5-second break or something like that. And then we should start to see our other wave coming in. Now you go in and we see we got the faster enemies in there too. No ammo left. So that's one way to spawn enemies. It's pretty simple. All you have to do then is start daisy chaining this stuff together, and start thinking of, like, you know, different enemy types, how many enemies per wave, what's the gap per wave, and yeah, it's not as hard as you probably thought.